Welcome to Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks. Stephen Hackett, the normal co-host, is on sabbatical this month, so he's not here right now. And that gives me the freedom to bring in other Stevens. We had to get some Stevens in here some way. So I'd like to welcome to the show Stephen Millard.
Hi, David. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Hey, Stephen. It's really great. It's been many years since you've been on Mac Power Users, but you and I keep in regular contact. For folks who don't know, Stephen is one of my favorite nerds, an IT professional who publishes a blog over at Thought Asylum. The thing I love about that website, Stephen, is the signal to noise. You don't post every day. You get a post up every 2-3 weeks or so, but every time you do, it's like a banger. It's just absolutely gold. It's some great automation workflow or something that you put together. Just a really good sign up for a website.
Thanks. That's really kind of you. I try and post at least once a month, ideally twice. If I can get 3 in, I'm doing well. I just don't have the time to do that. I have a day job and a family and everything else, but I try and put stuff out there as often as I can.
Yeah. The real focus of Thought Asylum is kind of like just clever automations and ways of using your Mac and Apple devices more efficiently. We're going to talk about a bunch of that during the show today, but just catch us up on what you're doing professionally.
Yes, so since I was last on a few years ago, I was working as in IT consulting at the time. I was a consulting manager, but it wasn't long after that show that I actually switched roles a little bit. So I now specialize in systems that help people learn. And I'm now working in an organization that's maybe 100 times bigger than the one I was in previously. It's not the first time I've worked in a very large organization, but I'm still getting, even a few years in, I'm still getting used to the speed at which processes happen and things like that. But the strangest thing of all is I now work technically in HR, but so it's a large enough organization that even HR has its own sort of technical department. And that's the area I work in, focused on technology now.
So that's technology, like in the use of teaching or learning?
So the industry is quite heavily audited. So there's a big focus on training and a lot around safety, given the sort of work we do, which is in sort of mining and things like that. And so it's about big enterprise systems to help make sure that people do their training on time, that the training is delivered wherever they are. We deal with things like virtual reality, different systems that people can sit in rigs and things, all sorts of things. It's really interesting, and like lots of AI coming in, and a really interesting space, and kind of got me away from more of the project management stuff that I was previously doing.
Yeah, I don't think people realize what a role VR plays in training. But in a lot of ways, that's kind of the leader in VR, right?
Certainly, there's a lot of simulations and things like that you can be doing with VR and assistive technologies like that will immerse you in some sort of environment, give you maybe different controls. It really kind of brings out a different experience, and it makes a real difference before someone goes and sits in, say, a machine that's worth millions of dollars, or is potentially, you've got to learn processes that might seriously affect people's lives if it's used incorrectly. Your own, others. It's very dangerous stuff. It's much better to kind of work through these kind of really detailed scenarios in these simulation systems first. So we have that, and we've got lots of all the standard compliance training and things like that as well. That probably makes up the bulk of it, but there's some really interesting stuff going on.
Now that the Apple Vision Pro is demoing in the UK, have you gone to an Apple store to try it on?
I have not. Apple stores are a little far away from where I live in the main for me to get to easily. But some of the VR folks who are third parties that we work with, they've all had very positive feedback about it. No one seems to be supporting it with systems yet, but they're all loving the visual clarity that they've seen when they've put the headsets on.
Yeah, I'd like it. Let me know if you ever try one on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it since you work with it. There's rumors that they're going to make a future cheaper version with lower resolution display, and my gut says that's wrong, that they should be doubling down on making the most out of what they have. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big $1 trillion company, so who knows?
Yeah, I think for large companies, I think they can probably spend the money, but depends how many home consumers they're gonna pitch for.
Yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
where the issue lies. Yeah.
But when you're not doing that, like I said earlier, you've got Thought Asylum with lots of great stuff about some of our favorite applications. Alfred, Drafts, Obsidian. We'll get into that deeper. One thing that I know has changed for you is that since we last talked, you have become a homeowner.
I have, yeah. A nice new experience, but it's certainly draining my coffers in terms of like the money I might have available to spend on new Macs and things.
Yeah.
but but it has given me the opportunity to do a little bit more than just switching Hue light bulbs on and off. So I've started using Home Assistant a lot more, and I've got all sorts of things around the house that I can control remotely or are triggered automatically, and I'm really enjoying playing around with that stuff.
Yeah, I want to definitely get into that later in the show today as we discuss. But let's just wind back a little bit. What gear are you using these days? Let's start with your Mac.
Okay, so this is probably quite embarrassing for being on Mac Power Users, but I'm still running an Intel MacBook Pro from 2019 as my main device. That's what I'm recording on at the moment.
Oh, shame.
And I do have an Intel Mac Mini as well, but that's probably from maybe 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
It's got an external SSD and it still kind of goes. But I do have some money set aside. I am looking to upgrade to a nice new M4 based machine, and I'm thinking probably some sort of desktop machine and a lighter laptop, because I'm not traveling as much as I used to. So having a full MacBook Pro kind of seems overkill, and the new CPUs. Well, I say new, they're not really new anymore, are they? But the Apple Silicon, I can easily get by when I'm on the road with something much lighter. But I think I'd like maybe a beefier desktop now. So it's kind of like, I have been thinking Mac Studio, but is just a Mac Mini that's maxed out good enough? I'm not sure.
I have thoughts. We will talk about this. But just to begin with, you're not alone. We have a lot of listeners that are still using Intel Macs. I mean, if it's still running and doing the job, there's no reason to go out and spend it, thousands of dollars just because there's a new thing. I sometimes equate it to refrigerators. If they have like a fancy new refrigerator, but your existing refrigerator works, food's still cold, do you really need to go buy a new one? Some of us enthusiastically say yes, but the smarter of us wait until it's time for a legitimate upgrade. 2019 wasn't that long ago, really. But it is also a computer from an age past because of the emergence of Apple Silicon. Does it drive you nuts all the time when we keep talking about all the cool stuff you can do with Apple Silicon? Is that getting to you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if I had the money available, I would have upgraded by now. But I have to put food on the table. My kids needed new iPads, so they got those first, and things like that. So it still works. It still runs. It's definitely feeling a bit sluggish. I'm a patient person. I'm excited about it because I've heard for years how good it is, how brilliant it is, how much improvement there is, and it's like, okay, I should be looking forward to a very big improvement when I finally do switch over.
Yeah, and I think you will. The whole thing is, it kind of equates to me, like, I keep saying this, but it's like the iPad, right? It's one system on one chip. It runs cool. It runs pretty fast, and it's just kind of better and faster because of that. Apple has now got control of the whole widget, but by waiting, you're going to get the benefit of, whatever is the latest and greatest. I don't know if you're going to buy in at M4 or M5 or whatever. And the thing about these computers is I think they're going to last a long time. I mean, Stephen, I don't want to make fun of him while he's not here, but he's talking about getting a new one, an M4, upgrading from the M2 and M4. Well, he's got a job in software development, so they want to go bigger and faster, so he needs a better machine. I've got an M2 that is just like perfect. I don't know when I'm going to upgrade this machine, but I will tell you right now, it's not going to be at M4. And if they're, it looks like the Mac Studio is only going to get the upgrade every 2 chips. At least that's been the case now. Like the M3 Mac Studio didn't get an M3, and if I want to get another Mac Studio, then the next window for me would be M6. And I'm not sure I'd need one then either, because these things are just so great. Maybe Apple Intelligence is going to evolve so quickly that you're going to want more neural processors, but I just don't know that that's going to be the case. I don't think it's going to evolve that quickly, and I don't think that these older machines are going to feel slow anytime soon. So once you do update, I think you're going to be really happy for a long time.
I am planning on it. Apple devices aren't the cheapest of devices, but I mean, I managed to get 10 years out of my previous MacBook Pro, and I'm going on for 5 or 6 at this one now. I mean, even my iPad is a iPad Pro from 2016, and it's the slowest iPad in my house, but actually for what I'm using it for these days, it's absolutely fine.
The question though that you're facing is one I face as well. Is like, do you get a desktop and a laptop, or just a powerful laptop? And also you're looking at like, well, if you're going to do a desktop machine, do you need a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio? I think it really depends. I think you'd probably be fine with a souped up Mac Mini. I don't. The YouTube channel? You're not doing as much anymore. Like, I feel like video production is where you start thinking the studio might make more sense. But for the everyday computing stuff, a souped up Mac Mini is going to be pretty powerful.
I have things that I run overnight at the moment. I'm not in a great hurry for them, so I just throw time rather than power at them.
Yeah.
But I do bits of development stuff here and there, and processing large volumes of data on occasion. So I am looking forward to something better. I just don't know which one I'm going to choose. But definitely I'm thinking, rather than switching my MacBook Pro around like I do at the moment, so it goes from my desk into my bag and back and forth, I'm thinking I'm going to simplify that and go something more powerful on my desk and get a light MacBook, but probably a 14-inch screen one or something to take traveling with me. And I'm sure that will be ample power for like out and about things that I might want to do in a coffee shop, or when I'm traveling away to visit family or something.
I think that one of the things people miss with the Mac Studio, or a point they don't realize, is the I/O. Like, you've got a lot of input and output ports on the Mac Studio that you don't get on the Mac Mini. If the rumors are true, you're going to have even fewer on the redesigned Mac Mini that we're supposed to get, I think, maybe later this month or early next month. So that could be an issue. I mean, it's easy enough to buy a hub to go along with it, but good ones are like $400. So then, like, you're in the Mac Studio space already. So I really like the input output. I am just so happy with my Mac Studio. It does everything I ask of it. It's always here. I don't need it on the road. I do have a little MacBook Air for that stuff, but for the bulk of my work, many, many hours each day, each week, each month, are sat at this desk working on this Mac Studio, and it's just a champ. I've been very happy. If for some reason it got stolen or melted down on me, I would buy another one. I don't think I would just get a super powerful laptop and have one computer. I don't think I'd get a Mac Mini. I would probably want another Mac Studio.
The I/O is quite interesting because I have to admit, at the moment, I do have a hub on my desk. I swapped out with my day job. I use a Windows PC.
Yeah.
I've got a laptop for that, and I swap that in and out. But for both those devices, I also have additional dongles that I've got hanging out because I've got certain peripherals that don't really play well with that hub. So my MacBook Pro at the moment is plugged into a full hub on my desk and has 2 other dongles sticking out of the opposite side. So the I/O does sound very appealing.
It's nice that you get, I kind of just decided I'm not going to buy a hub. I'm going to make the existing ports I have work, and largely did, except for my Stream Deck collection. I had to get a USB-A multiplier because I have too many Stream Decks. But other than that, I've pretty much got everything I need. Just plugged straight into the back of the Mac Studio. I don't know. I'm always happy with my Macs. They've over the years I feel like they've really come a long way, but I really feel like the Apple Silicon was a big turning point for the Mac. And when I hear from people like you that are about to get their first one, I think you're just in for so much delight. The way it boots up so fast and runs cool. I think there's a lot you're going to like about it. Do you use the do you run it in virtual PC mode much? Do you run PC software on your Mac?
I used to. I haven't done that for a very long time. I just I used to switch between I think it was Fusion, VMware, I think, and I think it was something like that, and they were always competing, and it was okay, but I haven't needed to do that for a very long time. The software that's been available on the Mac for the last decade or so has just meant that I didn't need to touch any PC software really.
And I feel like the only caveat is people who like to game and they just want to turn their Intel chip over to 100% Windows to run games. And you're not going to get that with Apple Silicon, but I don't think that's a very big crowd. And I think it's an even smaller crowd in the Mac Power Users audience. But if you like gaming, honestly, if you like gaming, get a gaming PC. There's just so much better and cheaper than a Mac for that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what you decide. We will, if the rumors are true, be getting a newly designed Mac Mini shortly here. So maybe that'll draw you in. You'll just have to wait and see.
I will be keeping my eyes peeled, and I have seen some rumors, so I'm going to see what happens soon.
You did upgrade your phone. You said you went from the 8 to the 14. That must have felt pretty good.
Yeah. So last time I was on, I had an ailing iPhone 8 that was definitely feeling slow. I switched up to the 14 Pro Max, and it's been absolutely spot on. So much better. The camera's obviously a massive improvement.
Yeah.
Screen is great. It's just been a rock solid workhorse, and when I'm out and about, I've always got that with me. It doesn't get a huge amount of use while I'm at home, but when I am out and traveling, it's been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. What type of photography do you do with it? Is it just like snaps, or do you like try to do proper, photography?
Just family photography these days. I used to do a bit of photography, but I had a digital SLR for that, and I think that is now in a box in my attic. I haven't used that for a few years now.
It's like that cutoff point between SLR and phone every year gets a little steeper. I feel like, that's Apple's goal, is to make it harder and harder to justify owning a proper camera.
I still have it just in case.
Yeah. You never know. I mean, there's still a thing called physics, when it comes to those lenses. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/MPU for the leading integrated cloud business software suite. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Some will say rates will rise or fall. Others may say inflation is up or down. The only way business owners can know for sure is if someone invents a crystal ball. Until then, over 40,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle. The #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, all into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time looking at what's next. I spent nearly 30 years as a business lawyer, and I can tell you that businesses fail because of a lack of information more than anything else. NetSuite helps you with exactly that problem. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/MPU It's a great resource, and it's available to you at netsuite.com/MPU. netsuite.com/MPU. And our thanks to NetSuite for their support of the Mac Power users and all of Relay. All right. Stephen, I know you do a lot of work with automation and other applications, but I thought it'd be fun just to talk through some of your favorite apps. And these will be familiar to Mac Power users listeners because you're hitting some of the best ones. But one we haven't given a lot of focus to on the show lately is Alfred, the keyboard launcher. I know that's one of your favorites. So how did you fall into Alfred?
Yeah, so I think around about the time I got my first Mac and was getting into things around that. I was, as I've always been, a Windows user during the day. But I was running lots of scripts and applications, and I would run those from the command line or a command prompt. And so when I came to the Mac, there was Spotlight, but I also discovered Alfred not long after, and that it just seemed a really good fit and like very similar to the way I was used to working on Windows. So that basically hooked me there and then. I was just used to actually triggering things via command lines and just entering via the keyboard rather than having to point and click everywhere. I'd always found that faster. Well, that may even go back to me. My first job was actually programming on mainframe systems where there was no mouse. So
yeah, the old command line interface. Well, I think a lot of people hear us talk about Alfred and they're like, well, I don't write JavaScript. It sounds like it's too much for me. But right out of the box, Alfred gives you a lot of tools that are really easy to use. Like it does app launching and bookmarks the same way Spotlight does, but it also gives you a lot more. Like it has text replacement and a clipboard history. And like there's just a bunch of great little features in Alfred that Spotlight doesn't have.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of been using it since the start. So originally it only had a small set of features, but that was quickly built out. And it was like, when I started using it, I was like straight in on bookmarks and there was custom searches. So I used to use those quite a bit. And you mentioned the clipboard history. I do use that as my clipboard history manager. I don't use it a lot, but when it's there, it's great. It's very simple, very quick to access, and it's been totally reliable. But I guess the real power came, I think it was in maybe version 2, where they started introducing workflows. And so I could start to build automations into that would just let me do things a little bit quicker, trigger things a bit faster. And it was much more akin to working with the script side of things that I'd been doing on Windows around that time as well. So that was kind of like the bit the piece where it really leveled up for me.
Yeah, and with workflows, the Alfred developers made a bunch of them, but also third parties and independent developers are adding them all the time. And it allows you to kind of, increase the skill set or the power set of Alfred. When we did the Apple Notes show, I had shared one that I use all the time by Sean Bollinger. It's called Search Notes. And if you put anything in Apple Notes, you trigger Alfred, you type the letter N and then space, and then it searches Apple Notes. So if you want to get to a specific Apple Note, you don't have to go into the application and like mouse your way to the search bar. You just hit N space, name of the note, and then you're right there. And that's a very simple example, but there's so many of these workflows out there. Before we talk about some of yours, what are some of your favorite workflows you use from other people?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't actually use a great deal from other people, I don't think. I'm just going to have a look in my list and see what I actually have. So most of the workflows that I use, I actually created myself because I could then tailor and create them exactly how I wanted. But I think some common ones in here. So I use one for 1Password. So that gives me quick ways to open and immediately log into websites using my 1Password stored credentials. I do use one by that was, I think, originally created for Hookmark, but that's an app that's now changed its name to Hook.
Yeah,
which is about I know you know, David, but about linking different files, different parts of the system, different pieces of information together, and allowing you to switch between them back and forth. So I like a bidirectional linking idea. So I do use that occasionally. And actually, I think they're the only third-party ones I have enabled at the moment.
Wow, I win. I have a lot more. I've got the OmniFocus collection by Auto Automator. That's one Sal put together because I complained it didn't exist anymore. The Time Zones one from Carl Smith. The Devon Think Search by Charles Ma. There's a bunch of them here that are really good. Like all the apps that I like to search into, I usually try to find some way to do it just from the Alfred bar. It makes it so much easier. I got a couple different emoji ones, but I don't use emoji that often. One of my favorite, though, is by some guy over in York called Bypass. Oh, wait, that's you. You made Bypass.
That does sound a little familiar.
Yeah, so tell us about Bypass. That's one you made for shortcuts and Alfred.
I, at the time, I think I found that I couldn't immediately launch shortcuts from Alfred, and it just seemed to be a natural thing that I wanted to do, like any other script or automation. And so when shortcuts came to the Mac, it got a command line tool. So basically, as long as I knew the name of the shortcut, I could run it from the command line. So it was relatively straightforward then to build something that would allow me to run the shortcut like that. And the command line tool also lets you grab a list of all your shortcuts. So I could very quickly get a list them all out in the nice Alfred listing display. Yeah. And you can start typing it in, it filters the list, you trigger it, and it can open it. And there's a few other things it can do. I think I've set it so that you can actually, instead of running the shortcut, you can edit the shortcut. You can get hyperlinks, generate hyperlinks to run shortcuts and things like that. But basically, I was just really looking for a quicker way to run a shortcut without having to open the Shortcuts app, go into it. And for some reason, I think at the time, even though Spotlight was supposed to be able to run it, for some reason on my Mac, it just wasn't listing them, even though I had all the settings set to say, index my shortcuts and allow me to run them. They just never appeared. I still don't think they appear. I don't know why that has happened, but.
Well, the challenge with Spotlight, in my experience, is it will search shortcuts and offer them, but it offers them without filter. So, like if you type the name of a shortcut, it'll also give you the name of related apps and contact cards and like everything else that Spotlight can find. And the beauty of your plugin is that you have to type SC first. So the way it works is you install this workflow, and then you invoke Alfred and you type SC for shortcut and then space. And then it's only going to search shortcuts and it filters out everything else. Now, maybe there's a way to do the Spotlight and I'm not familiar with it, but for me, that makes all the difference with doing this in Alfred, because when I want to run a shortcut, I want to run a shortcut. I don't want to see a contact card or an app launcher or anything else that Alfred can find. I just want to see shortcuts. And I actually think, that's a feature. People would argue that with Spotlight, you can just type the name of the shortcut. You don't have to bother with the SC. But for me, it's the amount of time it takes me to type SC is 100% worth it in the results I get. I really think that's the best way to do it, giving you that listing. And then, of course, you've got the additional features where you can trigger it to edit the shortcut and do all that. I just don't spend that much time in the Shortcuts app, even though I run shortcuts all day, because the Alfred launcher is kind of my interface for shortcuts.
I have to admit, it's the same for me. I'm only going into shortcuts if I've got to amend or create some new shortcut, but otherwise, I'm just launching it straight from Alfred. What's the last shortcut you made? Ooh, the last shortcut I made, I'll have to have a look. In fact, so the last shortcut I made was actually something to turn on a light in my home office when I switch my focus mode to recording.
Nice.
And it pops a little red light on that's next to the door so that the children don't come wandering in.
Gotcha. So, and is that through Home Assistant or through HomeKit?
Yes, so that's through Home Assistant. So I'm using the Home Assistant app to trigger that light, and then the light is just attached to something called an ESP Home device, an ESP32 device. It's very simple. I've just used some pretty standard components and loaded them up, but I can just change the color of the light and just pop it on next to the door, just to give them an extra warning.
Yeah, I think that small little shortcuts like that are totally underrated. A lot of people get intimidated because the big shortcuts, the big complex ones, but the little ones in a lot of ways are more useful, and everybody can make them if they just spend a little bit of time in there figuring it out.
Well, that one is literally one step.
Yeah,
right? Just
exactly.
Use the Home
right?
Assistant app and done.
Yeah. Have you ever done it to like run it as like a subroutine where you make like one step shortcuts, then you just run that shortcut elsewhere?
Yeah. I actually wrote some blog posts back when Shortcuts was workflow on how to chain things together and run them as subroutines. So long before you could ever run it using an action, I was doing it with URL schemes.
Yeah. And like you can make like focus mode, like say turn on, like I have I like background noise, and when I want to work, I almost always have the dark noise storm playing, the rainstorm. So I have a shortcut that triggers work mode and turns on the rainstorm. That's all it does. And that is a subroutine shortcut that I run in like 20 different shortcuts, because anytime I want to like do something work related or a setup or whatever, I just invoke that. And I always tell myself if I ever get sick of that rainstorm, I can go in there and change a rainstorm to like the beach or something. But it's been like 5 years and I still haven't changed it. So I don't think that's going to actually happen.
I use the, if I'm trying to concentrate, I use the spaceship engine sound.
Yeah.
But at nighttime, I always I have a custom version of the rainstorm one that I play. So I actually have something set. So depending on the time of day, it will default to different ones for me. But I do have a bit of variation there.
Yeah, no, totally. Something you do with the Alfred that we've never talked about on the show is you use the Alfred remote app. That's a little app you can get for your phone that hooks into, I'm not sure what the mechanism it uses because it works off site, right? But you can trigger Alfred on your Mac with your phone.
Yeah, so I think you do have to be on the same network. So if you were away, you'd have to VPN in or something. You'd have to have a remote connection back. But then it's just connecting point to point. But yeah, compared to some of the other applications that have got remote apps, their apps look quite dated if they still work at all. Whereas the Alfred app has always looked quite nice, in my opinion, and it still does. And so it's a nice interface. So, even though I think the Keyboard Maestro used to have an iOS app that was a bit, I think didn't get developed for such a long time that it did start going a bit strange. I haven't used it in a long time now, but I could trigger a Keyboard Maestro macro from Alfred.
Yeah.
So I would just use the nice Alfred app to do all my remote triggers that way.
Have you played at all with the Raycast, which is kind of the new kid on the block for launchers?
I've looked at it several times to just compare it to Alfred, but I've never actually installed it because every time I've looked, there's been nothing that has attracted me to it where I obviously have, over a decade of time invested in Alfred and it has done everything that I wanted to. But when I look at Raycast, there's nothing additional that it would do for me that Alfred doesn't already provide. So it looks like a great app, and I wouldn't dissuade anyone from choosing Raycast over Alfred or vice versa. But for me, just because of the time I've spent in Alfred and the fact that there's no killer feature where it's like, oh, Raycast is obviously better, I've just never spent the time. I don't even have it installed, and I never have to this point. But at least once a year I do look.
Yeah, I'm a little bit the same because I know Alfred so well. So it's hard not to. And like I've got the workflows installed and all the great work you've done. And like every app that I need to use, there's a really good Alfred workflow for it. But that being said, I did license it. I've now bought it for 2 years. And I trigger it on the option space where Alfred is command space. And so I'm constantly kind of trying it as Max Sparky. I feel like I need to keep up with this stuff. I will say I think their AI tools and their window management tools are probably better than Alfred's, but it's not enough for me to be like, okay, I have to switch. I haven't just had that feeling. But I hear from listeners all the time who swear that I need to switch, that they are so in with Raycast. But they continue to evolve it. It's a little bit of a different model. It seems like the extension stuff is done more internally by them, and but it's very pretty. And like I said, I think the window management is very cool. You just type in the different sizes you want through the keyboard launcher, and it resizes your windows. Actually, that's a good question. How do you resize your windows? I've never asked you that. I mean, as a Mac nerd, you must have something fancy, right?
Well, you'll be shocked, I'm sure, given the recent Automated episode, to find that I use Moom. And have done for a very long time.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then we just talked about it on the last episode of Automators, but their new version is pretty great. So
yeah. You may even find there's an Alfred workflow for it that I might have happened to have released earlier this year that lets you interact with your snapshots and layouts for Moom as well.
Oh, does it? I didn't know you did that. Is it out already?
Yeah. It's been out a little while.
All right, we'll put a link to that in. Well, one of the cool things they did with the new version of Moom is you have these snapshots where you have windows organized, but now they park them all under the green button, on any window. So you can very easily rearrange all of your windows exactly as you want with a push of a button or a keyboard shortcut. I guess I should say that with Steven on the show, right? You would never use your mouse like an animal, would you? I mean, you'd only do this with the keyboard shortcut.
It depends. I do use my mouse a lot, but I have some keyboard shortcuts set up to move them to various quadrants or halves and things like that. But I've got a few others where I don't use it as often. But I use save layouts. So I will use my mouse to actually lay things exactly where I want them. Differing sizes, and then save that snapshot and be able to trigger that from an automation. So I have various automations, some of them through Bunch, some of them through Alfred, that will just kind of move things around on my screen. But rather than just moving one window, I tend to be moving sets of windows.
Yeah. So you've said Bunch, so I now got to ask you about that. The made by our friend Brett Terpstra, Bunch is the application that allows you to kind of set up your Mac to do a thing, like if you're going to record a show or if you're going to do research or whatever the thing you want to do, you can, with a text file, it can open Windows, run Apple scripts, doesn't really arrange Windows, but it works very nicely with Moom. And there's a lot of people really into it. I did this already with Keyboard Maestro, so I have trouble getting hooked into using Bunch because I've already kind of solved the problem. But Bunch is definitely more elegant because it's just a bunch of text files. Sounds like you've gone down the Bunch rabbit hole.
Yeah, so that only happened this year. I've been looking at Bunch on and off for, I think, since Brett first published it. But I was always more free flow with what I would be working on, and either I would move things around on my screen. It didn't really matter to me where things were, or I would just be focused on one thing. And then I actually started doing a few projects earlier this year, and it was like, actually, it would be useful to just put these things around because I do seem to be putting them in the same place every time. And that was a good excuse to actually take a deeper look at Bunch. I kind of always had it in the back of my mind as I really should use this, but I don't kind of feel that my working practices were quite where they needed to be. And then there was a shift, and loving it.
Yeah, I honestly can't recommend this enough for people who haven't tried it, but It takes a little while. Maybe it'll take you an hour or two to figure it out, whether you use Bunch or Keyboard Maestro shortcuts. There's a lot of tools that'll do this. But the idea that you push a button and then your computer just sets itself up for the type of work you're going to do, I think it almost helps with the context shift in the work. Just like, okay, now I'm doing this thing because my computer just set that up and I'm not going to do the other thing. And it's not that much work to set these up. Once you get one done, then you duplicate them and change the app names or whatever. It's not that hard. I strongly recommend doing that if you have types of work you do routinely.
Absolutely. Templating and cloning is like, I used to work as a developer's best friend. You write it once and then you copy it and then you modify it. You don't start rewriting things from scratch again. It saves you so much time.
That's the dirty secret, isn't it? We all do it. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Indeed. Go to Indeed.com/MPU and join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. We're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. So ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Hiring the right person is not easy. You need to get someone with the right skills, someone with the right attitude, and it's really time-consuming. Indeed fixes that for you. Indeed gets you great candidates quickly so you can get the right hire and get on with business. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the Mac Power Users will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/MPU. Just go to Indeed.com/MPU right now and support the Mac Power Users by saying you heard about it here on this podcast. That URL one more time, Indeed.com/MPU. Terms and conditions apply. Do you need to hire? You need Indeed. And our thanks to Indeed for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM. Stephen, I know that you've gone in pretty heavy with Obsidian, and that wasn't. I think the first time I talked to you about it, you were a little cold on Obsidian, but at some point it got its hooks into you. What happened?
So I tried Obsidian, I think really early on when it was in its early beta, and unlike Bunch and Raycast, I did install this several times, and each time I tried it, it just wasn't quite mature enough at the time. It didn't quite work the way I was hoping, or it didn't quite have the feature set I was looking for. But I was on the lookout for something because I assume this is a safe space, and that I can admit for a long time I was an Evernote user.
There you go.
Evernote advocate.
Evernote was good in its heyday,
It was excellent. I relied on it for many years. I will simply say now, and I've said it to many people, friends don't let friends use Evernote, and that's all I have to say on that subject.
Have you got to that point with it? Because I know some folks are arguing that they're coming back and that they're going to resurrect.
I'd love to see that. But, I think that ship might have sailed for me. But I do have very, very, very fond memories. I did convert a lot of people to use Evernote back in the day. But I spent a few years trying to find an alternative. I migrated all my sort of reference content into DevonThink, and that's been great. And you mentioned that Alfred workflow for DevonThink. For some reason, I have never even thought of searching DevonThink from Alfred, so I'm going to have to go and grab that one after this.
It's a game changer. Really, it really makes it so much easier.
Yeah. So I've been looking and trying different tools for several years after that, trying to find something just to do my daily sort of note taking, and I was actually quite taken with doing it in Markdown. Rather than a more rich text format like Evernote or something like Bear would do. I've been a drafts user for a long time as well. That's great, but I was also looking for something that was cross-platform because of my day job and working on Windows. So I was looking for something web-based or something that I could install locally and could sync. And I tried various things, and nothing really stuck.
Yeah,
and it was just late in their beta releases that before they got to 1.0 that I was trying Obsidian again, and suddenly it was like, oh wow, this has changed a lot since I last looked at it. And it was that tipping point, and it was like I just not looked back. So I've been using it since before it was 1.0 release by several months, I think, but it did take a while to get there, but it definitely did. And now I can do all my notes in Markdown. I can link things together, and it was kind of hitting all the criteria that I was looking for. Because when I used to do things in Evernote, I used to quite unusually hyperlink my notes together, which I don't think many people did. I think most people relied on the search, but I also added in structures around that. I seemed to be doing a lot of the PGM stuff before it was kind of in vogue. But the fact that tools came along like Obsidian and Logseek and things like that will allow you to do the bidirectionality automatically is like a bit of a game changer. But that just means I can add a link to one note and jump to that note, and then if I arrive at that note another time, I can see that it also has a link from somewhere else and go and follow that link and navigate around my notes in that way, which fits with my way of thinking, because I guess I spent so much time doing research and management of things online where we're used to going backwards and forwards through sets of information.
Yeah, but you get that plus the simplicity of a folder full of Markdown files. I mean, you really can't beat that for a data model. I mean, everything is on your drive. It's in a format that'll be readable in 1,000 years. But when you go to sync it, they have an end-to-end encryption model. So you have the key, they don't. And like if you're using it for your daily note and you don't want it to be out there, you're fairly secure. It's encrypted. The way they've got their model set up, it's very attractive. Because of those features, to me at least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't keep anything that is confidential or secretive in any way in my Obsidian vaults. I have one password for things like that, and other places to keep it. That's if the stuff I don't want out there, I assume that there's a chance someone could get it. So it's a zero trust model on that front for me. But otherwise I will put everything in there, and being able to use Markdown is just brilliant because I can keep things nice and simple. I can basically edit it on anything, and like you say, a folder full of Markdown files. That's so portable.
I do think the Zettelkasten thing puts people off, right? You hear about like some complicated system, and they're like, "Well, I don't even need a complicated system." But for what you're doing, you don't need that stuff, right? You just use the basic linking and text file feature, and it solves that problem. But then as a fairly, a sophisticated user and IT professional, you can always bring in plugins as needed to improve the functionality of the app. It scales up,
Yeah, absolutely. I probably don't use it like a lot of people who are really into PKM, personal knowledge management, do. I don't use Zettelkasten. I don't journal for myself.
Yeah.
I guess my journaling is talking to my wife, really. And
there you go.
Getting things out that way. But I don't use it for generating content and ideas. It really is for me. It's like my notebook. I used to carry a notebook around with me, which I kept all my notes in, and I used to way back when I was a developer, I used to have a set of plastic sleeves that were almost in a plastic binder of like key things about systems, and I used to carry it around with me, and people used to refer to it as rather oddly as the Bible, because it had the answer to so many systems queries in it, because I just would collect all the technical documentation. And really, that's what Obsidian is for me. It's just a place that I keep track of everything I do every day in my work and things like that. And I have done for well over probably a decade and a half.
And because it's multi-platform, if you're at work on a Windows machine and at home on a Mac, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. And I can get to it on my iPhone. It would be wonderful if it had a web client as well, which it doesn't, but I can deal with that. But for me, it really is more like a notebook that allows me to cross-reference and search everything.
A lot of people complain that it's ugly, right? It's because of its the way it's written to be multi-platform means it's not really a Mac app. Does that bug you?
A little bit.
Yeah, me too.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, in the main, it's great. I love the flexibility of the UI, that I can move things around, that I can make it exactly how I want. But there are times when it's like, that doesn't quite behave like a Mac app. And when I'm trying to automate things and have to find workarounds, it doesn't quite look the same as the rest. And
it's not a deal breaker for me, but it bugs me, and it really bugs me on iPad. Like the iPad app just feels so bizarre to me.
Yeah.
I've asked, Obsidian Power users about this. A lot of them will say, well, I just don't use it on iPad. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a solution, right? Are there any Obsidian plugins that you're fond of?
Yeah. So in the main, I do try and avoid plugins that add new syntax, so new ways of adding content into the files, because I do want to try and keep it as markdowny as possible.
Yeah.
But there's definitely one that kind of breaks that, which is data view, which everyone who uses Obsidian discovers it, raves about, and for very good reason. You can use it to build almost database-like queries across all your nodes. And I use that quite a lot in various different vaults. I mean, I've got maybe I certainly have a half a dozen vaults that I have for different project things. And I'll use data view in different ways to kind of automatically pull sets of notes together and build links for them, or summarize them, or do analytics and things like that. So data view does break my rule, but it gets a pass because it's so brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I really love is, and I have it on all my vaults, is Templater. So Obsidian has an engine or a feature built in that allows you to trigger the inserting of other notes that you can use as a template for something, which is great. And then you discover Templater, and it's like on the Mac, you might have a keyboard shortcut, I think it is, where you can type in a few characters, and in Mac OS you can define it so it will enter your email address, and then you discover something like Text Expander, or where it's like, oh, I can run code when I do that, and oh wow, and it's like night and day. So Templater is similar. It gives you so much additional power and so many other things you can do with it. And again, it comes down to there's various codey sort of bits that you can do built around JavaScript. And so Obsidian has this model of plugins, like we were saying. So you can build a plugin and develop a plugin. You can, and in a lot of cases, you can just build a template in Templater and achieve the same result. It really is that good. And I've done that in lots of different ways. And it rather than having to write my own plugin, which would take me a little while to do, I can whip up a Templater template that does it, and I can maybe do that in 20 minutes.
It is so just amazing to me, this explosion of the idea of PKM and related notes and note software. I feel like we've undergone a bit of a quiet revolution with notes software over the last 3 or 4 years, and we're all better for it now. And you see it up and down kind of the software food chain. Like Obsidian's at the top. Like there's nothing you can't do with that app with the right plugins and a little knowledge. But people maybe don't want something as complex, or they want something more Mac-like. And then you look at like NotePlan. We did a whole episode on NotePlan a few months ago, and a lot of listeners have picked up on that app because it's kind of like the Goldilocks of this. It's in between Obsidian and Apple Notes, and people love that. But then we also hear from listeners who are just using Apple Notes, which also now can link notes, not as easily or as good as NotePlan or Obsidian, but it has some of those features in it. And you step back for a moment, and you're like, oh yeah, notes are pretty good no matter what app you choose at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I use Apple Notes as well. I tend to use it for like if I need to sketch something quickly, I might do that in Apple Notes, but also just keeping a few things like present lists and things like that with family members. You know, it's just so simple. It saves them having to install any other apps, and it works perfectly.
Yeah, but it could be more powerful than that. That's the thing, right? You know, it's like there are people using it way heavier than that, and they're getting by just fine. I'll tell you one thing about Obsidian also that is a friction point for me. I mean, I'm still an Obsidian user, but I don't capture an Obsidian to me always feels like a little bit more than I feel like I should need to do to capture an idea or get something going. I solved that problem with drafts, and I know you're also a big drafts enthusiast. In fact, that's how you and I first met, was something you had written about drafts that caught my attention. Where does drafts fit in at all for you these days?
Certainly for getting stuff into Obsidian, drafts is probably, when I'm on the go, drafts is absolutely the way it's getting in there. I'm a big user of drafts when I'm out and about.
Yeah, drafts is like my mobile Obsidian.
Yeah, so definitely for capture. I still use the Obsidian app for reference, but I don't really add anything new. And I might tweak something. I might make a small edit in the mobile app, but it's functional and fine for that. But anything I'm capturing on the go is going into drafts, whether it's going to Obsidian or anywhere else, or it's just an idea or just a thought. Drafts is kind of like my place for capturing pretty much anything apart from pictures these days. Everything goes into there, and then I'm a big user on the Mac as well, but it's really like on my watch for dictation, on my phone for like typing everything in, because you get your best ideas when you're having a walk or things like that. If Greg, developer of drafts, can come up with a shower version, that would be handy, because
shower drafts.
Like a lot of people, I get ideas in the shower, but I don't tend to have any devices handy.
I've talked about this workflow on the show before, so some of the listeners probably already know, but I use Whisper Memos, which has a watch app that allows me to push the action button on the Apple Watch Ultra and just talk to it, and then it uses an AI engine on the phone to transcribe it. But the beauty is it has an automatic emailer in it, and Drafts has that feature where you can have your Magic Drafts email address. So the net result is I push the button, I talk to my watch, and a few minutes later, it's in Drafts.
And you can be confident about the translation as well.
Oh yeah, it does a great job. I mean, I'm not going to post it straight out of there, but that's the way I get the ugly first draft or anything. Honestly, it's really changed my my attitude. Like I was just, I'm driving down the road and I think, oh, I need to send Steven a note about the show prep. I can just push the button and talk it out. And then next time I get to my computer, it's waiting there for me to finalize and send.
I think you probably have an advantage, though, in your background in law, because I've heard you say before that you were taught to dictate, right from the start. And I guess I do dictate things, but I wouldn't say I'm very good at it. And that's probably the same for a lot of people. Writing things down tends to help think through things and helps you go that bit slower. Yeah. Whereas I think you're used to thinking through things and then saying it.
And there are still things I need to write down, but for a lot of stuff, I can get it at. I can get that first ugly draft just talking. But just as an example of drafts being so ubiquitous, because they've got the feature that allows you to create a new one with an email, it's just the place that all my text goes. I look at it all the time. I wrote a newsletter about this recently because Dr. Drang had written a blog post about how he's been trying out Taut. And just kind of the idea of constraints into software. Taut, I think, allows you a maximum of 5 notes, but it's very pretty. It's made by Icon Factory, so it's a gorgeous, stable application. Stephen Hackett uses it a lot, and I thought, well, maybe I should try Taut, but then I look at what I do with drafts, and it's like, well, I could get a really nice pocket knife, or I could get a Swiss Army knife, and I like the Swiss Army knife,
David, you can use both. I do.
Oh, how do you use both?
So drafts is my place for capturing anything that is, I need to do some processing with it at some point in the future. Yeah, I'm not going to deal with it there and then. Tot I use as a scratch pad. So okay. I do have it on my iPhone just in case I need to reference something, like I've copied out like maybe a code for a cinema ticket or something. I don't know. But on my Mac, I use it as a scratch pad because I can leave it and sit it on the screen and it will just stay above everything else, and then I can close it and it just disappears away. So you get 7 different dots on it, 7 different notes. And so I will literally just, maybe I'm setting up a new script and I need an API key. Well, I'll just store my API key in there until I finish testing it out, and then I'll go and store it in 1Password, for example. So I use it very much as like a sticky note might do on my desk in the old days.
Okay, well, I'm going to try that. I'm going to install Tot and see if I can use it, because I use drafts as my kind of scratch pad. But the way you're describing Tot, it sounds like it might be a little better for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I found it was, and I think the Mac app was free. So I tried it and it was like, actually, yeah, this could be quite useful. And then I think you pay for the iPad, iOS app. But it's not an exorbitant amount. And I figured, I was finding it so useful anyway. I should purchase that and give something back to them.
Yeah, I have downloaded so many icon packs from them back in the day. I owe them money, really, if you look at the net accounting. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. So much more than a password manager. Head over to 1password.com/MPU for 20% off. 1Password has all of your security needs covered. With 1Password, you can secure every sign-in, store all sign-ins in secure vaults with the ability to securely share passwords, secrets, and more. All you have to remember is your 1Password. And it goes further because you can manage access to every application and web account for every member of your account, whether it be yourself, your family, your company, or your enterprise. And best of all, 1Password works from any device. Sign in to everything from any device and manage permissions to ensure only healthy devices are allowed access. The team at 1Password is obsessed with protecting your online privacy. That's why it's the most used enterprise password manager, used by over 150,000 businesses. And if it's good enough for them, it's also good enough for you and your family. 1Password is rated the best password manager by Wired. What I love about 1Password is the way it covers all of my security needs. Not only does it generate and remember passwords for me, it also does things like keep secure notes and make sharing easy and safe. It even keeps an eye on the services that I work with and lets me know if they've had a security breach, because sometimes the breach isn't because your password got stolen, it's because the people you do business with got hacked. 1Password's Watchtower looks out for you in that regard as well. And now they have the new 1Password Extended Access Management, the first and only solution that helps companies secure access to all apps from any device in today's security as a service centric hybrid work environment. So whether you're just looking for yourself or your family or for your multinational company, 1Password has a solution for you. And the good news is you get 20% off if you go to 1password.com/MPU. You can sign up for a new plan today and get 20% off. Join me and Steven and so many other Mac Power users using 1Password to watch our back on the dangerous world of the internet. Thank you, 1Password, for all of your support of the Mac Power Users. when I heard you bought a house, what the first thing that came to my mind is that's awesome. Steven is going to do some great home automation stuff, and I can like surf his wake like I do so often. So tell me, first of all, why did you choose Home Assistant over HomeKit? And well, let's just start there. You know, you've said several times now today that you're using Home Assistant, but you're not using HomeKit. What was the decision matrix there?
Well, I think there's an assumption there that you're saying that I don't use HomeKit. There might be some HomeKit use as well, but
Okay.
Home Assistant is where it's at for me at the moment. So, yes, I did try Home Assistant a long time ago, and it was okay. And then it died, and it died horribly, and I could just not get it running again. It was just erroring all over the place, and I spent so long trying to fix it, and I basically threw in the towel and didn't touch it again for years. And then the things I'd been reading online had suggested it was a lot more stable now, and a lot more development effort had gone into it. A bigger community had been built around it. I started seeing more and more people writing about how they were using it. And so at the start of the process where we were looking to buy a house, and as usual, it took a lot longer to actually get through that process than it had originally envisaged it to be, due to various legal things that we had to achieve and overcome and wait to happen. And so I actually started using Home Assistant at my old house, but not doing a great deal, but actually just learning about it and exploring it. And then more or less day one, when we moved in, the next day I woke up and started setting up all sorts of Home Assistant things from a box of gear that I'd amassed and had waiting in a cupboard, ready to move into the new house.
And you're still married. That's good. A lot of people who start that, you know, their marriage doesn't survive.
Yeah, my wife's a little geeky as well, so that really helps. My children have no choice.
Yeah, I mean, the rent's free at least, right?
Something like that. Yeah. So I do have problems with Home Assistant. I've had several the last few days with there's a wireless protocol called Zigbee, which you can use to control devices, and I have had things randomly dropping off recently and had to go around re-adding them. It's been frustrating, but in general, the Home Assistant system itself has been really, really solid and really so much better than my original use of it. The whole experience is like worlds apart.
Yeah, I should wind back a little bit. So Home Assistant is an open source project to do home automation, and it's very nerdy, but in all the best ways. Like, it traces your automations for you, so you know every step that happens and doesn't happen. You know, HomeKit famously is kind of a black box. You push a button and the light goes on until it doesn't. And if it doesn't go on, you have no idea why it didn't go on. You don't know if there was a problem with the signal, or if the light didn't receive it, or, you know, with Home Assistant, you get a lot more details about what's going on. And it's also very open because people write the compatibilities into it for most manufacturers. As I like my home vacuum is an iRobot. It doesn't have Home Assistant support, but I'm sorry, it doesn't have HomeKit support, but Home Assistant sees it. Same thing, the TV on my wall, I can turn it off and on with Home Assistant. HomeKit is clueless that it even exists. So you get kind of that power, but generally I would say it's more fiddly, and you've got to be willing to kind of get nerdy with it and, you know, run the updates and do things like that to keep it going.
100% agree. So I regularly check in every few days to see if there's any updates to apply. But
and there are a lot of updates. I didn't say that. It seems like there's always an update.
Well, they have monthly updates, but depending on what additions that you've installed as well, you know, they will update quite regularly. But yes, there's a monthly update, and then they will release point releases through the month to fix bugs that appear. So it's very much under active development, which is great to kind of see in a product. And, you know, every month it seems like, oh, that's a really cool feature. I'll have to have a go of that. And, you know, it for someone who is a bit geeky, then it's like a playground for home automation.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the fun things you've done with it?
So, just looking around my desk, I've got a couple of small LCD displays with a few buttons on in little boxes. One of them's telling me the weather and will actually give me updates about if my eldest child hasn't reached the school bus stop.
Okay, stop right there. How do you do that?
My eldest son, I live in a village in the UK, and my eldest son, he travels to a school a little while away on a bus. And there are a couple of bus stops he can go to get the bus in the morning. And just to make sure that I can see he's got there on time and that at the end of the day that he's returned on time, I've defined an area in Home Assistant as a zone around the couple of bus stops that he might use.
Okay.
And he has an iPhone because he's traveling away. We bought him an iPhone, and he has the Home Assistant app installed on that. And you can enable location reporting back to Home Assistant. So I can actually see particular zones when he reaches them. So I've got some of his friends' houses, I've got his school, I've got these bus stops. And what I actually have is some automations defined in Home Assistant specifically around the bus stops that check at a certain time of day. And if the criteria is met, it's this time of day, my son is at this bus stop, it will just pop up a little message on this text display telling me that he's at the bus stop.
You realize what you've built here is Mrs. Weasley's clock. You know what I'm talking about?
That. Yes, I of course. Yeah. So I only use it for tracking sort of bus stops, just because if he misses the bus, we then need to organise transport to or from the school. It can be quite useful for little things like that. So I have this one display, and it's actually sat on top of my webcam on my desk, so that I can there for notifications where I don't want to be disturbed, but it would be nice to know. So I refer to them as like my glanceable notifications. I've got a similar device on my desk, which is a clock, and it's just laid out with the date, the time, and I can see the seconds. And I created that because when I was using a Windows PC that was on Windows 10 and earlier, I didn't have access to change it to show me the seconds I had. And I can do quite a lot in a minute, so it was actually useful to know to the second how long I had before my next call. And I couldn't display that in the status bar on Windows, so I thought, well, actually, I could create a clock. And that actually gives me some details about the weather, the temperature in my office, and it's got some buttons on it that I can use to trigger other automations through Home Assistant as well.
Yeah, it really is a lot more powerful than HomeKit, in addition to giving you the feedback. And if you can keep it running and are willing to, occasionally have to deal with it, I think for people that listen to this show, it is completely obtainable. You can run Home Assistant on like your Mac as a server. I actually bought a unit from them at Rose's urging years ago. I think it's called Home Assistant Yellow. I think they've got a new one now. It's newer, but it plugs in. It's an internet device. You plug it in with an Ethernet cable to your router, and it runs the software for you. So it's kind of like a little home Assistant server. I have struggled with Home Assistant because my family is so invested in HomeKit. Like they know how to run the light switches and they know how to do everything in it. And it was hard to kind of get them invested in it, but now they love it. My wife likes being able to turn on the air conditioner when she's coming home, and she likes turning the lights on for the dog when it gets dark. And she's got like things she does. And I'm always a little panicked that if I go too far down the Home Assistant rabbit hole, I'm going to start breaking HomeKit, and then they're going to come for me. So that's my challenge. And I know that you can run HomeKit out of Home Assistant or the opposite, but I'm just worried about breaking the things that they rely on. And what I need to do is like spend a weekend just really like when they're out of town. In fact, now that I think about it, my wife and kids are going out of town for a family thing, and I'll be home alone a weekend in December. Maybe that's when I try and really just like run this to ground. And the ideal version of it would be that I get all the Home Assistant goodies, but they don't see it, and HomeKit still works for them. That's what I need.
Yeah, so you want to look at the HomeKit bridge integration for Home Assistant, and then you can surface things from Home Assistant into HomeKit, which is generally the way I've approached it.
Yeah, maybe I may call you or give you a ring when I'm doing that, just to get some advice. Like one of the things I've done with my Home Assistant is I put sensors on the refrigerator doors, because I have a tinnitus. That's how I pronounce it. Everybody tells me I pronounce it wrong. But the alarm in the door for the refrigerator is the exact frequency of the ringing that's already happening in my ears. So I can be standing next to it and it's going off and I don't hear it at all. So I have I have a little LED strip around my desk that turns red if the doors get left open. And that's like a Home Assistant thing. Like if the doors are left open longer than 2 minutes, the LED strip turns red. So like I go get a snack, come back, and my desk light suddenly turns red. I'm like, I didn't shut the door, So there's uses for stuff like that just, you can't pull that off with HomeKit. It's just not there.
It's not there today. Maybe it will be in a few years' time as they keep building it out. But by then, who knows what Home Assistant will be able to do?
Yeah,
but, they can sit and collaborate side by side.
Well, every time I talk to someone like you and Rosemary, who's really deep in Home Assistant, I'm super tempted to like burn the ships and really just go in hard at it. This is the kind of thing I would love, but I am worried about like screwing things up for the rest of the Sparks family. And it did take some convincing to get them into home automation, but now they love it so much that I don't want to break it.
Honestly, most of the stuff that I do in Home Assistant is stuff that happens automatically or when I press a button that, like you say, just wouldn't be possible in HomeKit. So we have some just some buttons in our kitchen, and we can press different buttons, and it will. It's really lazy, but it will actually set timers on our Amazon Echo for particular types of food, and we've got one that will flash the lights in one of my son's bedrooms and make an announcement to him and announce to us in the kitchen that it's made the announcement to bring him down for food, because otherwise he never hears us.
Yes, exactly. And then maybe you can add to a thing that automatically just turns off the PlayStation at the same moment. Right?
Unfortunately, he tends to be playing games on his iPhone, so that's not quite as easy.
Yeah. Whenever we have a guest on Mac Power Users, I always like to find out some of your favorite apps and services. What are the little apps and services that are bringing you joy and delight these days?
Oh, that's a good question. So I've probably been doing a lot of work with processing text recently, particularly around for any of the listeners who also listen to Automators might have heard that I created an Obsidian Vault for the Automators podcast. And I do a lot of work with the text after the episodes there. And a couple of tools that I use for that I would really recommend to people if they need to work with text at all are, first of all, Text Soap, which I know you've mentioned before, David.
Yeah.
And that's a utility which you can throw text at it, either as your clipboard or a single file or even a set of files. And you can define workflows within Text Soap that will take the text and process it in different ways. And it uses something called cleaners, which are little operations that will, say, change things to uppercase or strip out HTML code that might have got into the text and things like that. And then you can create custom cleaners as well, and you can combine these together and have multiple steps. And I actually use it loads with regular expressions.
Okay. That makes me nervous.
So regular expressions is definitely something when people get deep into this stuff or even slightly deep into the stuff, I'd really recommend looking into, because it just makes doing things like find and replace. You can make it a bit fuzzy. So it's like, it's not just find David and replace it with Stephen, but it might be replace a word starting with DA with Stephen or something like that. You can make it more flexible and do all sorts with it. And TextSoap has great support for that, and I find that I use that a lot.
Well, I was at WWC at a restaurant one time, and there was a guy sitting next to me, And eventually we got around to talking, and he was the TechSoap developer. just out of the blue. I'm like, are you kidding? I've been using your app for years. Yeah, I think it started as a series of Apple script, but he has like advanced it so much over the years. You love seeing these apps where just like one developer, it's his passion project, and he just does nothing but make it better. And TechSoap, I think I could make the argument almost anybody could use it. Like, even if you just like copy text off the internet for something you want to use for work, and you get all that extra formatting in there, TechSoap has like the perfect recipe to just to clean that. Whatever you do with text, TechSoap has got something you probably might want to use, and I'm a big fan of that app. But when you mention regular expressions, that reminds me of something that I've really been embracing with regular expressions, because I've always been a regex fan too, but I'm not a programmer. And every time I want to write a regular expression, it's like an hour to get it right, because I don't do it enough to be any good at it, and I know just enough to be dangerous. But you know what has changed the game for me with that is artificial intelligence. If you go to ChatGPT and describe a regular expression you want, look for any instance of the letters D-A followed by this and that, and replace it with Stephen, it will generate the regular expression. Now, it may not be as good as you would make it, but it's better than what I would make.
So I also use GPT AI to do regular expressions, but I would say that my luck with that has been less than yours. So I've done various online courses about prompt engineering, which is, best practices in phrasing your queries and things like that. So writing a simple, or the simpler regular expressions tends to be quite easy. Sometimes I have to write more complex ones, and it's like, it's going to be much faster if I use an AI to give me a start.
Yeah.
I reckon about 50% of the time I get a solid start, and it works how I expect.
And sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, even providing, here's an example, here's what it should look like at the end, here's what I want you to look for. Even then, I think when it starts to get more and more complex, it's hit and miss. Now, it's definitely worth it. 50% of the time, correct first time, absolutely. But I have, on a few occasions, ended up going 10 rounds and not getting anywhere, and it's hallucinating extra brackets and things that aren't even valid regular expressions. So starting out, absolutely, AI is a great way to kind of assist you with that. But as I would say, hopefully by the time you get to the more advanced stuff, the AI will have advanced and improved its own regular expression experience.
Yeah, good point. I have the same experience with AppleScript. Sometimes it really gets it, and maybe I have to go back a few times and say, well, it gave me this error message, and it rewrites some bit of it. And sometimes it seems like it's just never going to work, and I just stop. So you have to like know enough to know when you're drilling an empty well there.
Yeah, I can write AppleScript, but I would say that pretty much any GPT model can beat me at AppleScript.
Yeah. Any other apps that you're using a lot, or things that bring you joy and delight?
Yeah, so alongside TechSoap, I use that and set up custom cleaners and things like that to tackle the things I want to do repeatedly. If I just want to do things one-off, there's a great little app that I came across called Mass Replace It. And this allows you to do a similar sort of thing, but you can save templates and things like that. But it's much more lightweight. It doesn't include all the extra things, and you don't have to build entire cleaners. I kind of use it more as like a temporary quick fix version of TechSoap. And it's the sort of tool that I think a lot of people would go to their favorite text editor, so like BBEdit or something, to kind of search across files and do replacements and things like that. But actually, I found that Mass Replace It is just a little bit, it allows me to process things just a little bit faster. It allows me to interact and preview things and say, yes, I want to change that. No, I don't want to change that, very quickly. A lot of that might be to do with that I've added some of my own extras on top using Keyboard Maestro to automate some of the features around that. But I would say if you're going to do mass replacements and you want a nice, simple tool that you can actually save regular replacements in. And one of the great things about it is you can actually say, hey, for this, only want to search these folders for these types of files and things like that. And it's all quite nicely laid out. And I just like you say, you asking about things that bring you a little bit of delight, and Mass Replace It is one of those.
Yeah. I'd never heard of the app until you had put it in the outline, and I checked it out. It looks really good. As a someone who goes a little deeper into the tech than most, you also work with the command line, and you suggested a couple interesting command line tools. I thought that was worth talking about. What are you doing in the command line?
Yeah, sure. So I've been an terminal user for a very long time, but last year I came across an app called Warp, which is a terminal app with built-in AI. And my command line foo is okay. I can get by, but I'm not using it all day, every day. I'm not an expert. And I tend to use the same sorts of commands over and over again. But the AI in Warp is just really handy for I can't remember what the parameter is for this, or I can't remember how to set this up. And you can give it a text description of what you want to do, and it will build the command line for you. And honestly, I've never seen it get it wrong. So it's the fact that it's been so reliable for me from day one for the things that I just don't use often enough to remember, that it's just, I find it really useful. I still do use iTerm for some things. I have some pre-built profiles and things over there, but for my day-to-day interactive stuff, I now use Warp.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I've heard from several folks talking about that, and I think I just need to download it and spend some time, because every time I get in the terminal, I feel like I'm defusing a bomb, right? I shouldn't, but I do, because I know that there are certain terminal commands that could cause a lot of damage. And so I'm always just super careful, and having an AI assistant in that, I think, could really, really help.
Yeah, I think it's great, and is a great way to kind of have that co-pilot by your ear, just to kind of go, oh yeah, you do it like this, or oh, you're trying to do that, you can try it this way, and you can speak to it or type to it in plain text. So that's great.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on today. As soon as I knew that the other Stephen was taking some time off, you were one of the first names that came to mind, because I just love getting nerdy with you. And I knew we would have a lot to talk about. I'll tell the audience, I think we got through maybe half the outline today. Maybe. So there's so much more we could talk about. We're going to get you on again soon in the future. Hopefully we'll have the other Stephen here next time you get to come back. And where should people go to look for you, Stephen?
If you're on Mastodon, you can find me as @Sylumer. That's @SYLUMER at mastodon.social. As we mentioned right at the start of the show, I post at least once a month on my website at thoughtasylum.com. And if you really, really want to know more about what I get up to, I have a Buy Me a Coffee page where every month I post for free. You don't have to buy me a coffee or anything, but I just post on there, and you can see all the other stuff that I've been up to, which hasn't made it into a blog post. So quite a lot of the past few months has had like home assistant things in there about things I'm playing around with, stuff like that. So that's at buymeacoffee.com/Sylumer.
Yeah, go check it out. I'll put links in the show notes. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us at relay.fm/MPU. Go back there. You can see feedback. We've got a membership thing where you can get more power users. Today on More Power Users, Stephen and I are going to talk a bit more about shortcuts and where someone like him, a power user, finds use for it. And I'm super interested in that conversation. So if you're a More Power User subscriber, you're going to get that. You also get the ad-free extended version of the show. You can sign up for that at relay.fm/MPU. Thanks to our sponsors, NetSuite, Indeed, and 1Password, and we'll see you next time.